Hi, it's Maya here, and it's time for yet another wrap-up. In this wrap-up, I will be talking about the comics and graphic novels I read in April and May. So there's quite a few of them, so let's just get into it. The first comics trade that I read was Black Canary Volume 1, Kicking and Screaming, which is written by Brendan Fletcher, and the art is by Annie Wu, who I think is the main artist on this, and also by Pia Guerra. You might know Annie Wu from Hawkeye, which is where I first met her art, and I really loved it. And you might know Pia Guerra from Why the Last Man. Here's an example of Annie Wu's art in it, and here's some art by Pia Guerra. So this is a comic that I really looked forward to ever since I heard that Annie Wu is doing the art. I'm also really interested in the setting, which is Black Canary as the lead singer of a band. As I've said many times before, I don't know a lot about DC characters or Black Canary in particular, but I was still very interested in this. But sadly, this was a huge disappointment. I was really hoping to like this, but honestly, the story was a mess. I did like the artists, even though I actually do prefer Wu's work on Hawkeye to her style in this. So the art was still good, but the writing... I read Gotham Academy, which is written by Brendan Fletcher and Becky Cloonan, and that's one I like. But then I also read Batgirl, which is written by Cameron Stewart and Brendan Fletcher, and I don't really care for that one. So I was interested in seeing something written by Brendan Fletcher alone himself, and it seems it's his writing style that I don't like. So I think it's Becky Cloonan's writing that makes Gotham Academy work for me, because this really didn't. And I don't know if this works for anyone, because I don't think the plot was well structured at all. Things were just thrown at you, and it just didn't work on any level for me. I noticed that I gave it 2 stars on Goodreads, and I think I must have given the 2nd star purely because of the artwork. But I think I might go and just lower it to 1 star. So Black Canary is both the superhero name of Dinah Lance and also the name of the 4-piece band of this story. And in this story, Dinah is on a tour with the band. And there are weird shadow monsters and ninjas and things that could be fun, but it just doesn't work. But yeah, I might go back and drop it down to 1 star. Sadly, can't recommend that one. The next book that I read was Drifters, Volume 1 by Kota Hirano. Kota Hirano is the mangaka who wrote Hellsing, which I quite enjoy. This is a vampire horror gore action manga. I quite like some volumes, but in some volumes the gore goes even over my boundaries, and I can't really enjoy that. And also I don't really care for Kota Hirano's sense of humor sometimes, but otherwise I quite enjoy the aspects of these. So I wanted to try out Hirano's other series when I saw the first volume sitting in the library. And it was called Drifters, and it is a story about warriors who are plucked from different places in time and brought into this one sort of fancy world, and the warriors are called Drifters. I wasn't the target audience because I think I should have perhaps known who Odasaki no Ufu Nobunaga or Nasu Suketaka Yoichi were to enjoy this, and since I don't know about historical Japanese warlords or heroes or mythological heroes, I didn't really get a lot of what was going on. Apart from that, it was pretty generic, gritty action, while also being really confusing. Usually I give 1 star to books that I actively disliked, but in this case I was so far off the target market that I gave it 1 star because I couldn't get any kind of connection to any part of what I was reading. Also, Hirano's horse drawing game isn't strong, which made me smile. I hope he doesn't need to draw that many horses in future volumes. Not that I'll pick them up though. Then continuing on the manga vein, I read a few volumes of One Piece. I think the last one that I read was volume 70, and those are good fun. They follow this one pirate crew as their leader wants to become the pirate king. It's a shonen manga, pretty traditional in the way that it's just fighting against bosses and their henchmen, and then the bigger boss and their henchmen, and everyone has different powers. It's just really fun. I like the sense of humor in it. Also, I like that the main character of the pirate captain, Luffy, doesn't take injustice quietly. Even if other people say that they don't have time for this or that the villain might be too powerful for him, Luffy just doesn't care, and I find it really refreshing. If a villain is treating his henchmen as disposable or is trying to harm innocents, Luffy starts the fight with no pause to consider the opponent's power levels compared to his before punching them. Yes, the manga still solves all issues by violence, but this is shonen, and sometimes it just feels good to read stuff where injustice is easy to solve. The next comic was quite different. It's Soulless Volume 2 by Gail Carriger and Rem. These comics are just lovely and fun, just like the books. I like the first volume of the comic a bit better than this one. This adapts Changeless, which just has a lot more plot points going on than Soulless has. It just was a bit too much to cram in the comic form as easily as in the first volume. But it's very pretty and fun like always. Toodle Pip. 4 stars. During the Due West 24-hour readathon, I read 2 comic trades, and those were the Gotham Academy Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 1 was a reread before reading 2. I originally gave this one 5 stars, and it was just as fun now. And then I read the second one, which is called Calamity. And this takes a bit of a more look into Olive's past and in her mother's past. And I feel this sort of got a plot going, but I found the first volume to be a bit stronger as a volume than this one. But I'm still really looking forward to what comes next. I gave this 4 stars. Next I read 2 volumes of True by John Layman and Rob Giori. Volumes that I read were Volume 9, Chicken Tenders, and Volume 10, Blood Pudding. And I gave both of them 3 stars. True is always a fun time, it's fun to read, but I'm always sort of left craving a bit more. In this case also it had been a lot of time since I last read True, so I read Volume 8 quite a long time ago, and now 9 and 10 finally came to my library, so I picked them up. I was perhaps a bit out of touch with the series, but especially Volume 10 felt a bit underwhelming for me, because I thought that the solution to one of their problems that had been hinted at for many volumes beforehand would be a bit more complicated than what it was. But like I said, they're good fun. The thing that was a bit of a downer for me was the final page of Volume 10. I'm not gonna give out spoilers. It just was a look into things to come, and it said it will make you sad. But it just made me bored. It's just an old story device. I didn't care for it. So I'm actually not that intrigued by the next volume, but I'm gonna check it out when it comes to the library anyway. Next I read more DC comics. This is Batgirl Volume 2, Family Business by Cameron Stewart and Brendan Fletcher, and art by Bab Starr. I'm buying this because of Bab Starr's art. I might have said this when I reviewed the first volume. I didn't like this one that much because this one had a lot of guest artists and not that much Bab Starr's art. The stories in this run of Batgirl are quite simple, sort of Saturday morning cartoon villain of the week type of adventures, and I think you might enjoy this if you want something like that. But I'm left wanting more depth into it and more a plot progression. I gave this 2 stars, 2.5 stars. 2 stars for the story, but Bab Starr's artwork really brings the quality up, even though, like I said, there's a bit less of it in this volume. It actually made me laugh because the first few pages of this is a story that I had just seen a similar story. It's a ridiculous story. In an episode of NCIS that came on the TV, just at random I stopped and watched the episode, and then I read this, and it was this ridiculous real-life computer game storyline that I just found silly. I will not be picking up any more volumes because I can't justify spending this much money on a comic that I buy simply because I like the art. I think I'll have to find another way to appreciate Bab Starr. Then I read Castle Waiting, Volume 1 by Linda Medley, which is a hardback black and white comic about fairy tale characters, or at least set in a fairy tale world. It doesn't really have well-known fairy tale characters in it. So this is Volume 1 of, I think, 2 volumes, which take place in a castle called Castle Waiting, which in the beginning of the story loses all of its royalty one way or another, and it's just these people living in this castle, and anyone can come and join them if they need help and live in the castle. And it's mostly about their everyday lives and the different characters' backstories. I really like the clean line work and the expressions of the characters. They are very expressively drawn. But I gave this 3 stars because I didn't really care for the circus and convent story that took about a third of the book. I think it was too long. But other than that, this was fine, and I'll read the second volume from the library. I don't think there are any more volumes. There were a few cameos from fairy tale characters like Rumpelstiltskin, who had a seam in the middle of his body, because if you know the Rumpelstiltskin story, he rips himself in two in anger at the end of it. Apparently he has been sewn back together, so that was a fun little detail. And the final comics volume that I read in May was Lady Killer by Joel Jones and Jamie S. Rich. This is a story of Josie Schuler, who is a 50s housewife but also an assassin. She balances cheerful domestic bliss with coldly performed assassinations. So here's some of the art. I really like the colors. I think they fit in the 1950s theme of the comic. And it's a black comedy, and I found it quite fun and interesting and adventure-y. So I gave Lady Killer 4 stars, and I'm really interested in reading more whenever more comes out. And one thing that I also really liked was at the end there were these fake 1950s style adverts. So there were some mock 1950s ads about killing people. So those were all the comics that I read in April and May, and now that I look at the stack, it's quite a lot of them, even though this isn't even all, since some of them have been returned to the library already. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know how you have felt about these comics, and I'll see you all later.